welcome back. In the previous video, we talked about the fundamentals of web development and a career path. So if you didn't watch my previous videos, you can go back and watch, and then we come back and continue from this part. Alright, so before we begin coding the actual, you need to understand the terminologies and the concept, and it will help you to better understand what you are doing. So what is internet? Sometimes before I regarded internet something like a ghost, or a ghost sitting somewhere, and I don't know, it looks weird to me at the beginning, but after I went through to become a software engineer, I understand how internet works. So I don't want to dive into details about what is internet, but I'm going to give you a layman understanding of internet, and you can read more after this course. So in short, internet are what? Computers, or multiple computers being connected together, called internet, right? So we have all these computers being connected together using a cable. But the cable here are virtual cables, right? So this is what's called internet. So, but these computers is called server. And server means if I'm serving you, it means I can serve you 24/7, right? So these computers used as internet are called servers, right? Because server is always 24/7. That is available 24/7. So let's go ahead and briefly talk about server, because I just mentioned some term called server, and sometimes it looks a little quite understandable when it comes to understand what a server is, right? So here I've used this library as an example of what a server. So at the library, we have a lot of resources, books. For example, programming books, comic books, social books, whatever. And you can go in there 24/7 to access this book. So this library is what you call a server. And this server contains a lot of resources, for example, movies, funny videos, whatever. And you can go in there and access. So if you go back to the previous slides, so this computer servers has a lot of resources that you can type in and view. So let's go ahead and then continue exploring it. Alright, so here, so this user is called a client, right? A client. So this user can go into the library and access these resources 24/7. So if this library shut down, then we call this server is not available. And I believe you have experienced some before. Sometimes you'll be accessing certain websites and then you get a message that, oh, our server is down. Sometimes you go to banks and tell you that, oh, our banking server is down, so come back tomorrow. So it means that their server is not 24/7 working. And this server is being implemented by a back-end developer. Now I understand, now I know that you understand what is a back-end developer, right? So let's go ahead. How the logic comes in. How can you access internet and how it works? So let's take it step by step. This is really important. Alright. So one, let's take this user here with this expensive computer here. So this user is trying to access youtube.com, and you take your computer and your browser and then quickly type in youtube.com. If you type in youtube.com, there is a lot of things going on, but we don't see it. So let's look at the process, because you're a developer now, you need to understand how things works, right? So when you make a request simply means that you are trying to access a certain data, right? So when you click on search, right, and then the first path it goes through what is called IPS. IPS simply means internet provider, right? Internet provider services. So in US, their IPS is called AT&T, this one. And in Ghana, we have what is called MTN. This is called our IPS. IPS simply means that a company that you pay to access the internet, right? It's called the IPS. So when you send the request, it goes through the IPS first, and then this IPS will relate the request to what is called DNS. DNS means domain name servers, right? So they provide all the domain names. So when I say domain name, for every computer in the cloud, it has a specific IP address. So this IP address represents each computer. So your computer you are using has their own unique IP address, and it's being managed by the DNS. So for example, if you want to go to YouTube, right, then you type in youtube.com. This is what you call the domain name, right? youtube.com, domain name. This is managed by what? DNS, right? So this is being sent to DNS, and this is like a phone book. So it has all the IP addresses, all your computers in the cloud. So if you look at this one, let's go to the previous slide that I showed you. This one, you see, these computers or servers has their own unique IP address, and something like 2 point something like that. So this is being managed by what is called the DNS. So DNS will make the request. The DNS will look at a phone book and see that, okay, the resources you are trying to find is a right DNS or a domain name. Then it will send back to the browser. So for example, if you try to visit a certain DNS, a domain name, so let's try to search for, let's say, www.me.com, and I believe this doesn't exist. When you send, let's look at this. You see, this site cannot be reached because this domain name is not inside the DNS. It doesn't exist. So if you want to have this, we have to buy this one from the domain service providers. So that is how it works. Okay, so let's go ahead. So when you make the request, first of all, you type in google.com, and we know that YouTube exists. So it will go through the IPS, and the IPS will relate it to the DNS, and then it's okay, yeah, well, YouTube exists. Therefore, I will send back to you. And then the browser go ahead and then make the request. To name the request, we have a lot of servers in the cloud, right? Many of them. Let's say this one is for Google, this one is for Facebook, this one is for whatever, right? So make the request, then the DNS will match which domain name matches youtube.com. Well, it's from Google, right? Therefore, it will look through all the servers, as you see here, which of these servers has this unique IP address or domain name. Then it found, okay, yeah, this is the domain name. And then in here, we have a lot of resources in there, right? So the response will now give back and then display it inside the browser. And therefore, you will see what is called youtube.com, right? So that is all how internet works behind the scene. So you can dive into more details about this. So with this knowledge, the next video, now that we got the resources inside our browser, the videos, now that we are going to talk about how website works, right? So let's do that in the next video.